So, in the fall, our volunteer streamkeepers all turn their eyes to the returning salmon on our urban creeks who have come back to spawn. Um, Knowing how many salmon are returning can be a really important indicator for the rest of the health of the creek as a whole. So it's really important that we're able to monitor any changes to our salmon population and keep track of that over the years. So the main way that we do that is by what we call a spawner survey. And so basically that just entails a volunteer walking out on a segment of a creek and looking for any returning adult fish. So whether they're live fish that haven't spawned yet or dead ones that are already done and have washed up on the banks, all those numbers are really good for getting an idea of how many fish are coming back. So our volunteers will record that data, and then Greenways will collect that and then submit it as a whole to DFO. So that's great information to have, and in regards to DFO, it allows them to have a picture of what's going on the coast as a whole rather than just those big rivers like the Campbell River. We know it's important to have data about those, but looking at those small streams can give us an idea of how our watersheds are doing, and that's a really important thing. So I'm pretty sure most of us have been out on the creeks at some fall and seen salmon swimming around, whether it's just one or a whole group of them. But there are a few things that you can do to improve your chances of spawning fish and making your spawner survey more successful. So the first thing is just the timing. You want to be there at the right time of year where there's likely to be fish. So as a general rule, between kind of late September and early December is going to be a really good time to be out on our creeks around Campbell River looking for fish. And as well, keeping an eye on the weather can be really important because for the most part, the fish will like to move when there's a good amount of water in the creek. So after that kind of like first big fall rain event, that's a good indicator that you should be out there looking for fish. The one exception is if you're on a creek where there's a large population of pink salmon, you're going to want to get out a little bit earlier, more like August, September, to catch any of those that might be returning. And in terms of actually seeing the fish in the creek, there's also a few tricks. So fish are built to hide well in the creek environment. They don't want to be caught by bear, they don't want to be caught by eagles, and so their coloring makes them blend in really, really well. So it can be hard to just see with your bare eyes sometimes a fish that's holding and blending in really well to the creek. So one thing that is really a good thing to look out for is just irregular movement on the surface of the water. So looking across the surface, if you see something kind of shifting underneath the water, causing some ripples, there's a chance that that could be a fish. So keeping an eye for those kinds of movements can be helpful as well, to just give you a better chance than just looking for the fish itself. Other things include looking in hiding spots that they're likely to be at. Fish are likely to hang out underneath the cut banks on the sides of the creek where it provides them a bit of shelter. So keep a close eye on those areas is really helpful, as well as in and around any large woody debris that's in the creeks and also providing shelter for the fish. And the other thing is looking into pools where they might be hanging out, because fish obviously are going to move past those shallower, more riffly areas, but they're not going to just go up in one big stretch. The other thing I'll mention is when we're actually on the creeks, wanting to limit the time that we're actually in the water. So as much as possible, walking on the banks is preferable because it's going to allow the fish to have their space and us to have our own. We don't want to be disrupting any spawning gravel, any areas where fish have already spawned. We don't want to be causing too much silt to go up in the water. So if possible, staying on the banks is perfectly good. There are going to be some stretches where it's super steep on the sides of the banks and you need to get in the water, and that's fine, and areas where you have to cross, but it's generally better for you and the fish to try and limit the amount of time that you're actually walking through the creek itself. And then probably the most important thing of all is just talking about safety for our streamkeepers, because we need them in order to do the surveys. There's no use not being safe about it. So the number one thing, if you're able to, just go out with a partner when you're doing a spawner survey. It's going to be probably more fun, and then if anything happens, someone's there with you and can give you some help. If that's not possible for whatever reason, two really important things: make sure you have a cell phone so that you can reach out if you do need help, and make sure someone knows where you're going and when you're coming back. And then in terms of actually being in the creek, there are two more things. So making sure you're being cautious about what depth of the creek you're going into is really important. Chances are you'll have waders, so you might feel pretty invincible, but we don't want to be going up to here in our waders. You know, creek bottoms are slippery, they're uneven, there's a good chance of slipping, and you don't want to end up full body in a pretty deep creek. So what we would say as a general rule, if the creek is about here, that's good. If it's getting there and higher, just pick another spot or pick another day when the flows aren't quite as high. And that leads us into the next thing, which is just the flows. If there's been a big rain event or there's a rain event happening and the water is flowing higher than it would normally or stronger than it would normally, pick another day to go out is basically the simplest approach for that. Chances are in that case, it's going to be kind of muddy anyways. You're not going to have a great chance of seeing fish. So just hang out, enjoy the rainy day, come back when things have calmed down, and there's a better chance of spotting a fish, and you have less of a chance of getting knocked down by the creek. And so finally, there are a number of resources available for volunteers who are wanting to get out doing spawner surveys. Greenways has ID sheets that we can give you to help you learn how to recognize the different species of salmon in their spawning stages. We also have maps of the creek with segments on them so that you know where to go, where to be. And then also just general equipment, waders, viz vests, gloves, rain gear. If you're lacking any of that stuff, we have a big supply in our storage room, and we'd be happy to loan some for you so that you can get out and do a successful spawner survey.